here. 'Tis the season. Sometimes we've got to have meetings at odd times, and for a bill that's as important as this is and as complex and as heavy a lift as this is, it needed more time than I can give it during my normal Thursday meeting when I'm going to have a half dozen other House bills on the agenda that all need time as well. So I appreciate Representative Baumann and his flexibility and the rest of his team there, representatives, for being here and making time here in this evening. I'm going to try to keep us to about an hour, hour and a half tonight at the most so that people can get home. We've got some places people have got to go. So that's my timeline that I'm going to shoot for. I'm getting the sign-up sheet here in just a second. I'll just go ahead and tell you, I'm going to try to accommodate as many as I can tonight. That won't be every single person, I'm sure. We will have a limited bit of testimony, further testimony on Thursday when I expect this bill will be up for a vote during the normal Senate Judiciary meeting on Thursday mornings at 10, which I assume will probably be back in 129 at that point. Don't know, but okay. So there will be some time because I believe there are some folks here that wanted to speak that Senator Schickel has asked to speak that can't be here today, but we're going to be here by remote attendance on Thursday, so I'm going to try to accommodate them. With that, we're going to jump right in and have some discussion from the sponsor and his team to the extent that they want to respond to questions as they come up. But Representative Baumann, you have the floor, and I know we've got a slide deck, which there it is, queued up and ready for you. But actually, before you do that, we do need to take the roll, which I'm going to ask Mr. Wright to do.
Senator Berg. Senator Carroll.
Here.
Senator Deneen. Senator Neal. Senator Schickel.
Here.
Senator Stivers. Senator Storm.
Here.
Senator Turner. Senator Wheeler.
Here.
Chair Westerfield.
Here. For those, I just turned here. Off to a great start. All right. Thursday's meeting looks like it'll be in 149, which is probably why I announced that on the Senate floor a short while ago and not 154. All right, Representative Baumann, welcome. Thank you for making time. And I know you've got some family obligations I want to get you home to. So let's jump in. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present House Bill 5 today. I know it is for discussion only, but I look forward to that discussion. I'd like to, as we get started, introduce the folks at the table here with me, or actually, if you would, just introduce yourself.
John Hudson, State Representative, District 36 in Jefferson.
Jason Nemus, State Representative 33, that's Jefferson, Oldham, and Shelby counties.
Josh Crawford, Georgia Center for Opportunity, not in elected office.
And Mr. Chairman, behind me, the other members of the team that helped craft this policy, we have Susan Witten, Representative Susan Witten, Representative Emily Callaway, Representative Ken Fleming, and Representative Kevin Bratcher. And we would like for those folks to be able to come to the table and speak as needed through this hearing, if you would agree to that.
Certainly.
Excellent. Well, thank you again. This meeting comes on the cusp of a year's worth of work, and we've worked with constituents, elected officials. We've worked with leaders across the state, members from all sides of the crime issue, law enforcement, local, state, and federal levels, defense attorneys, prosecutors, judges, business owners, community leaders across the state, and most importantly, crime victims and their families. House Bill 5 includes provisions to address criminals and crime in our state that on a daily basis attacks the Kentucky economy, Kentucky families, education performance, and generally the quality of life in our great Commonwealth. As you are aware, Section 1 of the Kentucky Constitution grants all Kentuckians the right to the pursuit of safety and happiness. The foundation for civilized society in Kentucky is public safety, security, and protection, and our foundation is broken. We face an epidemic of crime in my hometown, and we continue to see record rates of homicides in urban and rural areas across the state. Over the last 4 years in Jefferson County, our constituents have suffered one violent carjacking after another, averaging nearly one every other day. Our overdose death rate in the state of Kentucky is 57% higher than the national average, with one of our Kentucky counties leading the entire country in fentanyl overdose deaths per capita. And retail crime alone is costing businesses in our great Commonwealth nearly $1 billion a year. Crime is impacting every single Kentuckian today. With this bill, House Bill 5, we are reasserting some basic and simple truths. Well, that there is a right and wrong, and that criminals are accountable for their actions, not society, and that society has a right to protect itself from the criminal element, a criminal element that has become an all too normal part of our world today. The first duty of any civilized society is to protect its honest citizens from those who prey on the innocent. House Bill 5 is ensuring that we have the strongest and most effective policy possible to support Kentucky families and our law enforcement. Across generations today, we are failing to provide the necessary foundation for Kentuckians to achieve prosperity, this critical foundation of public safety, security, and protection. From those sunsetting in our state that want to retire gracefully and peacefully in their community, to my generation of Kentuckians that are working and raising a family here, and to our most important generation, for our youngest generation that is growing up in a world today in an environment that normalizes crime and criminal behavior as just a regular part of our daily lives, as we all hope and we all pray that one of our loved ones or family members isn't the next victim or statistic. As the legislative body of our state, it is our duty, it is our job to ensure that we have effective policy to hold criminals accountable for their actions. And the truth of the matter is that the majority of Kentuckians do not support soft-on-crime policies that treat law enforcement harshly and lets criminals off with leniency. And I won't recite the horror stories of the fear and terror in our streets, but as you may know, the House Committee heard testimony from 3 families that couldn't be here with us today: the Luxemburger family, the Conley family, and the Trout family. These families have experienced the most horrific tragedies imaginable, the needless and avoidable loss of a loved one to crime. And the fact of the matter is that too many families across our state share these tragic stories. House Bill 5 will ensure we limit the number of future victims of crimes and future stories like theirs. Whether our family and loved ones return home to us each day shouldn't depend on the misfortune of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It should depend upon a strong societal foundation for public safety, security, and protection. A foundation that supports Kentucky families with a strong and effective criminal justice system. As you said, Mr. Chairman, on the outset here, we do have a couple of different substitutes that we were going to discuss today. So we have both of those to go through today. As I have gone through both of them, I ask this committee to support the one proposed by Senator Schickel. My slideshow here reflects the bill that we passed through the House in a bipartisan manner, I may ask, with big numbers, 76 in support. Over 3/4 of the people's House voted for House Bill 5. And with that, I'll get into the provisions here. We'll go through them one by one, kind of at a high level. I know we only have about 20 minutes, so if you want me to stop for questions as I go through, Mr. Chairman, how would you like to do that, or just go through it all?
You jump in and we can stop, or I'll stop as questions come up.
Okay. All right. These are in order of the bill. So if I can we move that? That's all right. So the first one is the 3 strikes law, which is going to require life in prison without the possibility of parole for any experienced violent criminal that commits a 3rd violent crime. All right. And we'll get to what those violent crimes are a little bit later in the bill. Removing early release. Sorry, I can't. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I move that over a little bit? We can't see that section.
Move whatever you need.
Thank
to move.
you.
You break it, you buy it.
That's good. That's perfect. Thank you.
Looks like I was more successful than I thought. Just teasing, Senator.
This provision, Section 2, would limit any form of early release for someone that uses a firearm in furtherance of their crime. If they were a previously convicted felon, they knew or should have known that the firearm was stolen, or that they were on probation or parole.
If I can't, it might be helpful if we jump through, because I'm going to have questions about my own sub and where my
Okay.
sub differs from yours, if that's okay.
It's your meeting, Mr. Chairman. You can drive.
Well, I don't want to throw you off your presentation, but in the interest of time, it might do well just to hammer out some of the details. And I asked you this question a couple times when we've met. On your Section 1 changes regarding the 3 strikes provision that you've got, is there a reason why the PFO statutes, as we currently have them, are not meeting the outcomes you're hoping for?
Yeah, absolutely. The 3 strikes provision will be, as I understand it, Mr. Chairman, harsher on experienced violent criminals that continually commit these heinous acts against our fellow Kentuckians. And it'll also be much simpler, meaning that...
So I'm going to stop you.
Yes, sir.
What's wrong with the current PFO statute?
So
And this is for anybody in the group. It doesn't have to be you,
Well,
Representative Baum.
Yeah, so I'll answer that. So what we find is, as I see, what I do is what I've done for about 8 or 9 months when we started working on the bill, is I've looked at all the folks who are convicted of murder, and I've looked at their history, and most of them, now this is to other sections as well, most of them had previous gun crimes that were dismissed or merged. Now that's section I think too, but the particular here is a lot of them, Mr. Chairman, had 3 violent actions in their past. And so we think that's more than enough. I actually think the third, it shouldn't just be the third, it should be the second, because in Kentucky, the violent crime statute is very, very small. They're
Were the cases you looked at, Representative, were they out of Jefferson County or another county?
No, it was all
over the
across.
state.
Yes, sir. Some of them in Christian County.
Was there a conversation with the prosecutors in those
Yes.
jurisdictions about why PFO wasn't sought?
No, I did not have a conversation with the prosecutors in those particular areas, and some of them they probably did seek PFO. What we're talking about here is if it's a third time, you're going to prison forever. And I want to. That sounds really harsh, but I want to mention 2 things. This is violent crime, 3 strikes. This is not the normal California 3 strikes where you steal a cell phone and there's petty theft. This is just violent crime. Point 1. Point 2. In Kentucky, our violent crime statute is very small. Not even arson, 2 is in it. Now we're adding.
I think all the subs make that correction.
Well, thank God they do. Because if you burn a house down and somebody's in it, that's a violent crime. If you take a shot at somebody and you happen to miss or hit, and you don't kill them, but take a shot, like what happened to our mayor, take a shot at our mayor,
well.
we fix that. Thank God we do. Those are violent crimes. But even with the amendments, the violent crime statute in Kentucky is mighty small. And so what we're saying is, if you commit 3 violent crimes, if you burn a house down, you rape a woman, and then you kill somebody, you're going to prison for the rest of your life. There's nothing wrong with that. And you know who likes that the most? The person who would have been the 4th victim of violent crime. This is not a 3 strikes law, as we've heard all over the media, as we've generally heard it throughout the country, which I think generally doesn't work. But here for violent crime, it's different. There are and I'll be quiet after this. There are very minimal people who commit violent crime. That's not the big group of criminals. There are not many that do that. So the ones that will do it 3 times, I don't think Eddyville for the rest of their life is too much to call for. I think that protects our people.
Moving on to the next section, Mr. Baumann, Representative Baumann, you were talking about parental accountability, I believe. I don't know what your heading was. There we go. So in this particular section, the sub that I have offered reduces that fine to $100 and reduces the community service to 10 hours. But more important than that, it requires the court to accommodate the parents. I think I've shared with you already that our statutes already provide for a felony charge for a parent that's not being the responsible parent that they ought to be. Why prosecutors aren't using that tool that they already have today, I don't know. But my concern with this, of course, judges already have the power to compel someone's attendance. They can already issue an order, and there's language isn't necessary to compel their appearance there, and they already have contempt power. But I have concerns about 40 hours of community service for a parent that's a single parent and is working a 3rd shift job or whatever. I have concerns about that same parent having to come up with $500. No joke. Representative Baumann, Representative Nemes, if you asked me for $500 extra today, I could not give it to you.
You don't have to give it. You show up to court for your child.
And what if, and again, it goes back to the language that I offered there, because without the language in my sub, there's no requirement that the court accommodate that parent's work schedule. If that parent's not available on Judge Cutoff's or Judge Adams' first normal juvenile court docket, tough luck for the parent. And now we've put that child in even more danger, because now the parent's going to have to miss work, might lose a job, and have to give up rent money to pay this fine for a court case or a hearing they couldn't attend otherwise. Is there an objection to the language allowing or requiring the courts to accommodate a parent's schedule or using Zoom court?
Mr. Chairman, I believe if we have a juvenile standing in front of a judge,
Hold on a second. Is there an objection to that language that I added?
go ahead.
I don't think there's an objection to that, asking the court to work with the family.
Okay.
Yeah, when that child is in front of the judge, and obviously Senator Schickel, with respect to the committee sub, will make all decisions on that. I'm speaking for only myself. I don't have any objections.
Sure, but you started the remarks, or Representative Baumann started the remarks by signaling that that's the sub he wants.
That's
right. I feel like you can speak on the sub and the provisions you want in it.
I speak for Jason Nemes, and I would recommend that. I have no problems with that amendment being in there, which is to suggest or recommend to the court that they work with the family when they bring the child. We want the family there, Mr. Chairman. That's because
I do too,
yeah,
and that's a problem around the country, and that's a fair thing to want.
Yeah, sure.
But this is going to have the unintended consequence of hurting families and children, I'm afraid, because not every family can come up with this or can commit to 40 hours of community service. Do you object to the 10 hours and the $100 fine?
I believe if we're going to accommodate the parent schedule, then we don't need to, lighten the penalty.
Should there be a means test of some kind for a parent that can't afford a $500 fine?
I think that if a child is standing before a judge, there is no place that parent should be other than right next to them.
And I'll say again, Representative Baumann, with all due respect, if my kid was in court today and I had to pay a fine today, I don't have $500 extra to give. Should the language of the bill or the sub, whether it's Schickel's or mine, Senator Schickel's or mine, should it include a provisions that the court should identify the means of that parent before assessing a fine?
From my perspective, I don't want to do that. I want there to be clear penalties for violation. Let's try to limit those violations. I think your suggestion's a good one. I've just mentioned that with respect to the asking the court to work with the family. Hopefully, we never have the violation because the family needs to show up. So I don't think we should reduce it and give discretion to the court in that way.
What should happen if a parent can't afford the fine?
They
What should the
show up.
consequence be?
Well, look. What happens if anybody can't pay a fine? They should show up. That's the answer to the question.
What do you propose happens in the case where in a case where they don't have the means to pay it? If the fine stays at $500, what happens to the parent who doesn't have $500? Are they held in contempt? Are they held in confinement for contempt? You tell me what you would propose if you're not willing to move the fine down.
We have fines all over the place for traffic and a lot of different things that people have difficulty paying. And so the same rules would apply here. This is not, we're not inventing the wheel here. If someone has a fine that they have to pay that they can't pay, their normal process would take over.
I don't know what that normal process is short of contempt.
Well, the judge can say you have 18 months to pay it, and if you come back 18 months later, I've had clients like this, so have you, I'm sure. 18 months come and they've paid 300 of it. They say, Judge, I just need 6 more months. You get 6 more months. You work with them to pay the fine. But it's a fine that should never have been. Wouldn't have been levied if they had just shown up with the child, and with your amendment, I think they have a lot of leeway.
Mr. Chairman, I would just point out that
yes, Representative Hodgson.
the language says up to 500 and up to 40 hours. It's not a mandatory. So there's a lot of judicial discretion built into the language there. And $1 and 1 hour are within that realm.
Indeed they are. If you can find me a judge that regularly gives 1 hour of community service or assesses a $1 fine, I would argue that that's compelling, but I don't know of any. But you're right. It does say up to, and that's a fair point. On to the next section. Thank you for helping break that down. I've got you on the list. Sure. Senator Turner and then Senator Berg.
Microphone.
Turn your mic on, Senator, please, sir.
All right.
in the practice of law that I know of, is it true that if a person is found indigent in any case, the court don't make them pay the fine. They will make them pay the court costs and give them some time to pay that. But the court would have still the ability to find them indigent in this case. And he says it go from anywhere from $0 to $500.
The court has that authority at all
Yeah.
times, right?
All right, that's all I wanted to.
Senator Berg. And let me just say, I'm going to let you ask questions. I'm going to try to get through as many questions as I've got, you've got, but let's make sure we ask questions. I don't want any
Comments.
commentary. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm thinking about the parent who is told that if they miss another day of work, they will lose their job. I guess what you all are saying is let them lose their job? That's in the best interest of the child?
Of course, we're not saying that, Senator. We're not saying that at all. First of all, let's figure out what we're talking about here. We're talking about a child who's committed a crime, and they're a child, and their parent needs to be in court. And with Senator Westerfield's amendment, obviously that's the process, and the process is working. Then that they would work with the court. They have days off. They're not allowed to work in Kentucky every single day. And so hopefully the court would work with them in trying to schedule a date. We're not trying to say they should lose their job. We're saying that their kid needs their parent with them in court.
Hopefully. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Representative Baumann.
And sections 5 through 8 covers the fentanyl death by delivery. As I mentioned at the outset, one of our Kentucky counties, Bath County, actually is leading the country in overdose death rates per capita. And so this provision would make, if you knowingly sell this poison to one of our fellow Kentuckians and kill them, that you would be charged with manslaughter under this provision. Distribution would be manslaughter in the second degree. And we also, as we went through the conversations with different stakeholders on the House side, amended the Good Samaritan law to ensure that it is absolutely clear that anyone that calls for help for someone in an overdose situation is immune from any type of prosecution.
On section, I don't want to skip ahead, but you're almost to unless you have anything else on this section you wanted to cover.
No, sir.
On carjacking, which is the next one in section, well, it should be close to the next one. Or did
There we go.
Senator Neal, you have a question on this
Yeah,
section?
I just on the fentanyl,
Go ahead.
on that particular section. So if someone has a social relationship with someone and they transfer fentanyl back and forth, et cetera, and one dies from that, I just want to know, is that person also come under this particular provision?
Yes, and knowing. It would have to be knowing distribution.
If they socially exchange drugs, it could be other kinds as well, but they happen to have fentanyl, and they're there together willingly engaging in that social activity, and one of them dies and the other comes under this provision.
Well,
I just want to be clear.
They don't happen to have fentanyl. They knowingly distribute fentanyl. That's a very different thing. And that was something that Senator Turner asked for in the interim hearing that we had last year. So it's not, it just happens to be laced with fentanyl. They have to know it.
Okay, so someone had to prove that they knew it was fentanyl.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. Representative Baumann, I didn't have a problem with, and my sub kept your carjacking offense in there. Did you all object, or can you agree, or do you agree to making sure that you can't double prosecute for multiple charges with similar offenses?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, that solves that problem. Thank you. And then in section 11, I know, or my section, I'm sorry, I'm looking at my committee substitute, which is section 11 in mine in the bill. This is the gun destruction, the firearm destruction. Do I understand correctly that the language I propose that simply allows the surviving family member of a victim of homicide to request destruction is not tenable for the House?
That's correct, sir.
Reason being is those funds right now support the Kentucky State Police, and in order to hold them harmless.
Well, I understand that, Representative Hodgson, but do you know how many firearms are seized and forfeited as a result of homicide in the state on an annual basis?
I don't know the number.
So I don't either. But this only applies to the weapons used in homicides, which I think is probably a pretty small number. I would agree that there would be a fiscal impact to not just state police, but also the local prosecutor who gets a percentage of that money as well. Having been a prosecutor, I benefited from the use of forfeiture dollars to pay for training and different things. But this is a pretty small part of that overall pie.
It is small. It's more a matter of principle that the KSP currently and other people, as you mentioned, get funds from that auction. We wanted to hold them harmless by the bill, as well as make sure we weren't using taxpayer funds for that, but provide the families of victims of homicide to have some measure of closure by having that gun destroyed, even if they are not an FFL. Because right now, any FFL with anybody's money could go buy a gun and destroy it themselves. This just levels the playing field so somebody's not an FFL can go in and do the same thing.
My concern with that, Representative, is that I think it's cruel to make the family have to bid and win the auction to have it destroyed.
It wouldn't have to be the family. It could be anyone. It could be a nonprofit.
But the family is the one that has to fill out the form that the state police would create under the bill, if I'm not mistaken.
Doesn't have to be the family. Whoever is designated the gun for destruction.
And Mr. Chairman, right now, you can't do that at all. What we're trying to do is allow that to happen.
That's
so
fair.
This is a step in the direction that you want to go. We can't take 3 or 4 steps, but this is, I think, a good step.
You know, it's funny. Sometimes we can't take 3 or 4 steps unless we all want to take 3 or 4 steps. And then we're happy to take 7 or 8.
Well, I'm the whip in the house. I can't get to 51 for that step.
All right. Senator Schickel.
Well, and there is another perspective on that, and I can tell you don't share my perspective, and that is by these actions we're saying that a weapon is an intrinsically evil thing, and many of us do not believe it is.
Okay. Please proceed, Representative Baumann.
Do you have somewhere you want to skip to next?
I know that the camping, the homelessness provision is next. So the only change I made here is the referral to services. Is there an objection to that?
What was it?
Can you briefly describe the referral to services change?
Yes, sir. If you look, and you should have the sub in front of you. It's section 12, page 11. I don't change your language at all until you get down to subsection 3. And I add the language, a peace officer may not cite a person for a violation of this section without providing referral to services to assist the person, including homeless shelters or mental health resources, and if appropriate, and the rest of the language refers to the Senate Bill 90 conditional, and that's a pilot program, and I don't think it's in Jefferson County, so that wouldn't apply there. But I just, as we talked about, Representative Baumann, making sure that we respond not just to penalize the conduct, but to respond to the root causes of their homelessness in the first place. Is there an objection to requiring that referral?
First off, every law enforcement officer I've spoken to has the goal to get these people into rehab, and they said they need a stick in order to do that. In the bill, there are provisions that any judge can use the diversion program. So that would require the person to be charged and then go through.
Except that's
diversion.
not I understand, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's not the judge's decision to make. And the language in the bill doesn't require it doesn't change the status quo in terms of diversion. What guarantees or helps the people that are going to be caught by this get referred to the services that I think all of us would agree they probably need?
I think we all do agree. And the social workers and police officers and prosecutors and judges, they all agree on that. I think that is the goal. And even formerly addicted homeless people that I've talked to, they said, we need tough love. We need somebody to force us into rehab because when we're in the throes of addiction, we don't want to go. That was a young man that I had lunch with up here. So I think the tool is already there. You're suggesting that we make it the enforcing officer's discretion versus the judge's discretion. I think the first goal with the enforcing officer is he's going to say you need to move along, and if the person chooses to be non-compliant, then that's an entirely different situation.
Anybody else have a position on that?
Senator, I don't know where you're reading from.
Bottom of page 11, top of 12 of my sub, PSS 1.
Okay. I think let us go back and talk more about it.
Okay.
First time I've
Sure.
So,
And I would entertain changes to that language if there's some better way to do that. But I think there has to be a response to the underlying homelessness. And right now, the language of your bill hopes someone does something, and there's no requirement or demand of the system to do anything. And if there's no requirement or demand of the system to do anything, the system typically doesn't do anything. Okay. Just give me just a second. Senator Berg, you had a question?
I do, Mr. Chairman. You know, and Representative Nemes, we had a quick conversation in the hall about this last week, but my understanding is you want to make homelessness illegal because the assumption is that most of these people need to get into rehab. This is what Representative Nemes told me. That
is wrong.
Right, yeah.
That's wrong.
That's wrong.
That's wrong.
Yeah, you finish and then I'll respond. That I don't agree with that.
You don't agree with that?
No.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay, my question. Up to 40% of LGBTQ youth are homeless in this country. How does this bill address that population?
All right, so let me address what I don't remember the conversation we had. If it was very quick in the hallway, I think it must have been.
I can remind you, sir, it was outside of room 113.
Okay.
I asked you, are you really going to criminalize homelessness? And your answer, sir, was no. Our goal is to get everybody into treatment.
That's right.
Okay.
That was your answer.
Okay, good. So that's not what I misheard you a second ago. I thought you said that I want to criminalize homelessness, which is not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to push people into treatment, no doubt about that. So what would it do to the LGBTQ community? It would do the same thing for LGBTQ community than non-LGBTQ community, who are people who are homeless who need treatment. We're trying to get people into treatment, which is one of the major goals of this provision. The other major goal of this provision is
for what?
Treatment for if they have mental health or substance abuse or whatever it is for that individual. But the other major point of this provision is public safety. You and I know if you go from the Hyatt to the Bat Museum, there are a number of people who are homeless on the streets. And we're trying to help those folks and also save or protect the people who are on the streets. So both of those goals are at once.
And not only are we not trying to not criminalize homeless, we are not criminalizing homelessness. It is not a crime in the state of Kentucky today to be homeless or unsheltered, and it will not be a crime in the state of Kentucky to be homeless or unsheltered after we pass this bill if we are so blessed.
Senator Schickel?
Yes, I want to talk about this homeless thing, and I know it's probably, I don't share the opinion of a lot of people in this room, but if you talk to any police officer or any police chief, my Commonwealth attorney told me this just the other day, not everyone does want to go into treatment. That is a fallacy. Right. Many folks do not. One of the reasons we have so many homeless people is because they don't want to go into treatment, and they'll have to do it if they're in a homeless shelter. Sorry, folks. The government can't fix everybody. I know we think they can. This bill doesn't address it, but the reason for that is we've really decriminalized drugs for the most part, possession and using them. So people aren't afraid to do it in public. Hence, they're homeless. That's a problem for another day, but to just say that everyone that's that everyone in addiction wants to go into treatment is not true. Just go talk to them, and they'll tell you.
And we do want to get them there. We want to help nudge them into that treatment that they so desperately need. And we know in the state of Kentucky that we have more treatment beds per capita than any other state in the country. Our governor proudly proclaimed that in his State of the Commonwealth address, and we're very proud of that as well. And we want to help those people get to that treatment that they so desperately need.
You are such an idiot.
Anything else y'all want to add on this? There's a couple of sections that are related to the camping. Anything else y'all wanted to cover?
No, sir.
Okay. On this particular section, I added, let's scroll back up to find it. So
your sections aren't the same. Can you refer to
they're
page?
not. In my sub, it's page 14, section 17.
Thank
The
you.
changes to 202C and 202. well, 202C. You all in your bill delete the demonstrated history of criminal behavior that is endangered or cause injury to others or has a substantial history of involuntary hospitalizations. Can y'all explain what y'all are trying to get at in that section again?
Yes. So a few years ago, Senator McGarvey.
I remember. Yeah, right. I remember that case.
So
tell me how that connects again.
So there was a guy. I've forgotten his name. I don't want to say something
I
wrong,
can't
so I'm not
remember
going to
the
say a name. There was a guy in Louisville who had been charged with rape and then biting someone's face and a bunch of heinous things, and they could never try him because he was mentally incompetent to assist in his defense. But he was about to be released from the mental institution because the question there is different. The question is if you can be charged or tried, is can you assist in your defense? And the question in mental institutions is a little bit different. Effectively, and this is not the exact terms of art, but effectively it's, are you a danger to yourself or others if medicated, so forth. And so we put on there the language that you see was something that Senator McGarvey came up with to keep that individual incarcerated. Now, fast forward to today, we have a situation also in Louisville where this gentleman does not.
But they don't have the history.
He has no history of violence. He killed his
right.
mother, and his family is scared to death of him, and they don't want him to get out. And we say, if the finding is that he's going to be a danger to himself or others, even if he doesn't have that demonstrated history, he should continue to be institutionalized.
So I think you all can. I'm going to assume, hopefully, that you might still approve the language that I came up with in my section 17. Because I think the problem you're trying to solve is worthy of solving, but I don't think you should eliminate the history as a possible way to get there. If you delete the language altogether, then there's no requirement of history. I still think that's probably worthwhile. So I make them, it's an or, an either or. Either criminal behavior that has endangered or caused injury to others without reference to a history, or recent behavior causing, attempting, or threatening harm, or the substantial history of involuntary.
The recent behavior is satisfies me so long as it satisfies, obviously, the sponsor and Senator Schickel.
Sure.
But it gets at what we're trying to get at.
Do we need to get Senator Schickel's approval too?
Well, he's the sponsor of the committee sub that we support, so I reckon we do.
That's interesting.
Well, I don't, that's the process I understand.
I'm asking if you support the language I've got here in my sub for this part.
I do.
Thank you. Does that mean that the others don't?
No, sir. It does not mean that. I have no objection. I'd love to speak about it a little bit more.
Sure,
but
please.
On the surface, I have no objection.
I think he means to make sure he has your we understand the same thing.
Okay.
We're all singing the same 8-bar.
I'm not trying to confuse the matter here. It's clear that you, as you've said now twice, that you don't want my sub. I don't want Senator Schickel's sub, with all due respect to Senator Schickel. But I think there's a way to meet in the middle. And that's why I'm trying to work through some of the differences. I think some of the changes I've made are not unreasonable.
Mr. Chairman, I understand how to count votes, and we agree with it so long as we retain the votes to pass the committee, and that's where we are. So it's not up to us only. This is the Senate's committee, and as long as the majority of your committee are for it, we'll support it.
It's important for me to know whether or not you all support it.
And we say yes.
Thank you. All right. Go ahead to the next. I think this is fine. I don't have a problem with this one at all.
Okay.
I did add requiring an ID for indigent defendants at no cost. Was that a problem?
That's a budgetary issue. It brings in, I don't know what the cost of that is. That adds a complication. Obviously, we support the policy. Representative Witten, who's a co-sponsor of this bill, has a bill for that to that effect, but it does add a complication because it's a budgetary issue. Next.
Anything on Madeline's Law?
I was just going to say I don't have a problem, and the change I made you had previously agreed to, Representative Ballman, and that's just the additional data piece. I had asked for charitable bail orgs if they're going to provide. I mean, you've already set out some good data that they need to report on their utilization or who, how often they're being utilized. But I wanted to make sure if there was a repeat customer, an offender that benefited from a charitable bail org more than once,
right,
that they're tracking that.
Yes, sir.
No objection to that, I assume.
No, sir.
Okay. And I don't think there was any changes to that I remember. The first responder. Or the parole board changes. I did, excuse me, I want to say I did add, Senator Neal had a bill session, and Senator Neal, I forget the bill number that required, thank you, Senate Bill 202, that's, that passed out of this committee, I think unanimously, maybe not unanimously. I don't remember how Senator Schickel voted on it, but it simply required that, the bill, Senator Neal asked or gave the parole board the authority to order as a condition of parole participation in a violence reduction program, and my substitute required that it be an evidence-based violence reduction program. Would there be any objection to that?
No, sir. We were on the parole board provision here on the screen, though.
That's what that was about.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't see what was on the screen. Shopkeeper's privilege.
No, I think we were talking about two different things just now. Maybe I'm wrong.
I was thinking we were.
Were you talking about the
Sorry,
parole
Mr.
board, or were you
Chairman.
talking about the provisions?
I was talking about
We
the
have
parole
we have
board.
some GVI provisions in the bill separately.
The provision that you're talking about, Senator, was on the reentry section slide, but it is the same.
I think we're all good. It's just we were
Right. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying
things.
attention up there.
Yeah.
Heard parole and I perked up. Okay, the shopkeeper's privilege. So, and Representative Baumann, you and I have had this conversation a couple times before. I'm curious if you, Representative Nemus, or any other folks on the team had a chance to review. I have a lot of concern about the language that you've got, and I'm not saying that what I've come up with here is the perfect solution, but I'm trying to address my concern in some meaningful way.
From where are you reading?
On my sub, it's page 29, subsection 2 out of section 23. Line starts 21, lines 21 through 25. So the first sentence is the same as your bill. Any person exercising the authority granted in subsection 1 of the section may use a reasonable amount of force necessary to protect him or herself and to prevent the escape of the person detained or the loss of the goods for sale. I wanted to make sure, at first, I thought I want to make sure that the use of force to prevent the loss of the goods or to prevent the escape was commensurate with the value of the goods, if that makes sense. My brain went there to try to make some sort of reasonableness, some sort of...
I don't know that that's going to be possible in the moment for the shopkeeper to determine, what the value of the goods are that the criminal
I
is
suspect
stealing.
the shopkeeper knows exactly the value of the goods that they've got.
You said at first you were thinking about that. That's not where you landed.
It's not.
Yeah, right.
So the second sentence is what we've added, and then the sentence down in subsection, the new subsection 4. The use of deadly physical force shall not be justified under this section, because again, it's just to prevent the escape or to prevent the loss of the goods. Preventing escape and preventing loss of goods, that's hard for me to think that deadly force is acceptable. This doesn't change self-defense or defense of others at all, where deadly force might be
Well, I want to be really clear on one thing. We didn't accept deadly force either. It was reasonable force. So the way you've said it, I think, is what we already do in a different way, using different words. So if you want to use your words rather than ours, but we don't anticipate that there's deadly force. Our language was reasonable force, and so I don't think you're saying anything different than what we said.
Well, I felt the risk was greater with your language that deadly force might accidentally be used or intentionally used, and then, the language down below that gives them immunity for having used it.
Well, I don't think there's any jury in Kentucky that would say deadly force is acceptable when somebody's trying to steal something from a retail store. And so I think we're saying the same thing.
Okay.
You spell it out. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
But I want to be very clear, especially for the citizens watching.
Sure.
We do not accept and have never, and it was never been in our bill, that a shopkeeper could use deadly force to protect its property.
I appreciate that. And I think it's good of you to say that, and I appreciate that. Yeah, Senator Turner.
Last question.
Yes, sir, you may.
If that theft was going on and the person making the theft had a weapon in their hands pointed at that shopkeeper, that would be a different fact, would it not?
Well, that's a reasonable analysis, right? So a jury would have to make that determination. What factors go into determination of determining whether the shopkeeper responded reasonably. If it's just to protect property, it's not reasonable. If it's to protect their life because the other person has heightened the situation, that's different. Same is true in any assault and self-defense situation already under the law.
Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If he points a gun at you, you shoot.
All right, what's your next one, Representative Ballman?
Next couple deal with the violent offender statute and the penalties associated with those. So we'll be adding these offenses to the violent offender statute, including attempted murder, not on this slide here, and providing that they serve at least 85% of their sentence before being eligible for parole.
So my biggest concern here, Representative, or concerns, robbery second degree. I mean, robbery sounds violent. Robbery second degree might be very dangerous, and it may even be violent, but it's not violent in every single case. I've had robbery second degree, and I don't have the elements pulled up right here to remember exactly what sort of structure or building you've got to, or that's burglary I'm thinking. But robbery second is a Class C felony, and there are robbery seconds I'm not sure ought to be there. But the biggest concern, I could live with robbery second in there, I think, but the biggest concern is wanton endangerment. Representative Nemus, you know this better than anybody else on your panel. That is a humongous.
This is wanton endangerment with the discharge of a firearm.
I understand, but
There's a big difference.
there is a big difference between every wanton endangerment and wanton endangerment with the discharge of a firearm, but we're still talking about a whole lot of cases. And that level of conduct is not the same, and it may not even be violent.
Well, I think shooting a gun is violent inherent in itself.
Yeah. So if there's a sorry. Go ahead.
But we're not talking about. I think that was a very big governor on the charge here. We're not saying every wanton endangerment, which could be driving your kid in a car without being in a car seat. We're not talking about that. It has to be the discharge of a firearm. That's mighty different.
But shooting at an outhouse could be wanton endangerment, but that shouldn't be considered a violent offender
I think
statute.
it has to be shooting at an outhouse knowing someone's in the outhouse.
Well, okay, but
Yeah, that's
this
different. And I
doesn't
think
say
that is violent. If you know somebody's in an outhouse and you shoot at it.
And that's the problem we have is reckless disregard for human life and people firing firearms into homes as they drive down the street or on street corners, killing people, killing our children. And that has to stop.
The problem with wanton endangerment, though, is that it, again, and Representative Ballman, you've heard me say this, and I commend you for that objective. I don't fault, and I should have said that from the beginning. You've heard me say this several times. I don't question your intent on any of this, not for any of you at all. And it's no secret the violent crime that's happening in Louisville, homicides in particular. I don't fault you for trying to bring something forward, but 3/4 of the bill casts a net that's 3 times wider than it needs to be. And I'm concerned that wanton endangerment, because I know how often prosecutors amend down to that. And you can object to prosecutors amending charges down all day.
But Mr. Chairman, they do amend to wanton endangerment a lot. I understand that. But that's not what is in this bill. It's wanton endangerment, and I'll read it. It's on page 39 of Mr. Schickel's substitute, lines 20 and 21. Excuse me, I can barely see. Lines 22 and 23. Wanton endangerment in the first degree, as described by Section 40 of this Act, involving the discharge of a firearm. We believe, and I'm not willing to move, that wanton endangerment involving the discharge of a firearm is a violent offense such that the person that does that should have to serve 85% of the sentence that the jury sentences them to. That's where we are, and I don't think we have room to move on that.
Okay. What's your next thing? I don't think there were any changes to that one. I haven't seen Senator Schickel sub on that, but I don't think there were any changes on mine anyway. So I assume there weren't any on his. Or on that. Well, does Senator Schickel sub have the language that Jefferson County Schools asked for in this? Representative Ballman, we talked about this, and there were...
This is the highlighted in red here, sir, are the changes that are in Senator Schickel's sub from the bill
So it's not
we
this section
passed.
yet, though. Or is it in this?
This has to do with violence intended to target schools.
Is this the section that has the reporting requirement that
No, sir.
JCPS asked for. Okay.
Sorry, I wrote the wrong way. Well, maybe that was it. Let me double check. Let me double check that, Chairman.
I'll look and you go ahead.
Okay.
See, I think that's
Yes,
the only
it is.
place
It's
where
section
it-
36
Yeah, I think
on
it
page
is.
45.
So the JCPS, and I'm not here to carry water for JCPS, but they requested language that changed the reporting requirement that you had, and they offered, if you recall, Representative Baumann, they asked for one option, but you didn't want that. There was an alternative option that changed the reporting, so
That's
it
right.
still goes to someone other than their local police.
That's
department.
right, and that's what we need.
Does
Today
Senator
they
Shipwell's
wanted
sub have that language in it?
the original bill should have that language in it,
It does
that
not.
it goes to
my
that it goes to
knowledge-
JCPS and another agency.
But the alternative language said for a school system that has their own police force, that police force can then report it to state police.
All
It
right,
still
I'll-
gets reported to state police.
That's right. That's what we need.
That's what you said you needed. Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Maybe
sir.
page
Senator
48.
Storm.
Page 48, perhaps.
Check it out.
Just to confirm, you'd like to call Brandon Storm?
Nope.
Mobile?
He's right there. You have to call him.
I hope he answers.
Yes. It's got both, yes. Or, no, it says or. Okay. Law enforcement is carried by the local board of education.
And two. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we're in good shape, sir, with the bill that passed the House. Shouldn't be any changes needed to satisfy JCPS.
Except the language that they did not like. According to Chuck.
I'll take it up with Chuck, sir, but
I'll let
yeah,
y'all do that.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you. All right, where are we now?
We are on one of the most important ones, in my opinion, anyhow, which is hardening sentences for adults that are using juveniles to commit crimes. So these are the folks that I know we talk a lot about sticks. This is where I want a big stick. So these adults that are ruining not only our communities but these kids' lives by setting them up into a life of crime at a young age is absolutely abhorrent, and we have to crack down on these adults that are doing this.
I think there are some folks that are going to testify here in a bit that might have some suggestions to adjust that. but
Outstanding. I look forward to it.
What you got next? I don't think there's anything there. Senator Berg, did you have a question on?
Go back 2 slides. Yeah, this is my question, sir. We have a statute here in the state of Kentucky that makes it illegal for somebody to provide a minor a gun. We have never, ever prosecuted that statute in this state. Never once. Never once have we gone to somebody and said, you provided a gun to this minor that was used in the commission of a crime. What's going to be different about this?
Well, I'm certainly not in a position to charge or prosecute crimes, Senator Berg, but I can ensure that we have the strongest and most effective policy possible to give those folks the tools to charge them and prosecute them, and that's my role in this, and that's what I'm going to do.
Well, and I'd also add, I agree with that, and I would also add that law enforcement and prosecutors have asked us for this, and so I believe they're going to charge it because they want it. I think it's a tool that they want, especially in Louisville, where we have a gang problem that adults are using children to commit their crimes. And so I think it's something that, well, I know they've asked for this, so I believe they'll use it. And
I'm
I'm
just
not aware
saying
of the
we've
statute.
had this. We've had laws to address this, and they have never been utilized in this state, ever.
Yeah.
So I'm asking you, please, to think about that.
I'm not aware of that statute. I want to know about that statute, and then let's go to our Commonwealth Attorney in Louisville together and ask her to start charging that because she ought to. And I know she's new, so I'm not saying she's not charging something that she should. But if it's not being done, let's incentivize our prosecutors to charge that, because if I provide a minor a gun and knowing that they're going to use, or even if it's illegal in and of itself, then I should be charged with that. We agree with that. That's an illegal act that, if it's already on the books, needs to be prosecuted. I don't think that is addressed here.
Okay. Go ahead, Representative Ball.
Sorry. Yes, sir.
No, you're fine. Yeah, I don't think there are any changes there.
Yeah, I was talking about it earlier. Oh, did you want to speak about the GVI?
No, I mean,
This is what I thought you were referencing earlier.
Right.
Yeah. I think we're in good shape there.
yeah, I think we are.
Again, this is another one just kind of
Right.
strength.
And I think we
Does everybody
changed
know
that
what
to
GVI
3.
is? I mean, I know that you're okay with it, but I don't know if everybody.
Feel free to elaborate.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll let Mr. Crawford. He's the expert.
Sure. So that's Louisville's group violence intervention effort. It targets gangs and street groups in the city of Louisville. It leverages an event called a call-in to bring people to a central location and delivers sort of 3 simultaneous messages. One, that the level of violence is unacceptable and needs to stop. If the individuals choose to continue to commit that level of violence, then law enforcement will act appropriately and apprehend the individuals within the context of the group dynamic. So they will sort of rain down fire on those groups if they continue at that level of violence. The second message is that should you want to leave this lifestyle behind, here is every available resource, every resource you could think of, whether it be you need a driver's license, you need diapers, you need whatever. These are things that are available to you if you want to leave this lifestyle behind. The third thing is what's referred to as a community moral voice. It is oftentimes a mother of a homicide victim, local religious leaders who talk about the unacceptability of this violence and the pain in particular that those mothers feel from having lost a child, and that don't want the mothers of the young men, predominantly young men, in the audience to go through the same kind of thing. Now, the mechanism by which individuals are brought to these call-ins typically are the leverage of some sort of criminal justice status, probation or parole status. Kentucky is the only state in the country in which the Department of Corrections has determined they do not currently have that authority. This language would grant that authority to the Department of Probation and Parole to make sure that those individuals can attend those call-ins.
Anybody have any questions about that? Thank you, Mr. Crawford. I appreciate that. Is the language that I proposed here not tenable?
Page.
This is on fleeing and evading. So in sections 47 to 49 in your bill, in mine it is section 40 and 41.
What page might be quicker?
On sub 1, it is 63 and 64.
And what does your change do, Mr. Chairman?
I shared with Representative Ballman my concern. Again, fleeing and evading, there are a lot of fleeing first and second charges. They're not all terribly violent or dangerous incidents. Sometimes they very much are. I don't mean to downplay that at all. But if the intent is to go after the ones that are violent and are dangerous, I proposed, instead of increasing the penalty class for every single one of them, for first and bumping it from a D to a C felony, and every second offense from an A misdemeanor to a D felony, and increasing parole eligibility up to 50% for every single charge, why not do that just where there are aggravating circumstances, to get at the very sorts of fact patterns that you're concerned about and that led to cases like this? I use the DUI aggravators, all but one that relates to BAC, but I'm open to any aggravators, and I invited Representative Ballman to pick any aggravators you thought were appropriate.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to work on this one with you, but I will absolutely have to connect with our stakeholders at the FOP, because I know this is a priority for FOPs across the country, because there is such an affront to law and order in our society today. And I'll go back to them and have that discussion.
Okay, Senator Schickel.
Yes, we have a situation today. It's amazing how much things have changed since the reason for this language is because when police now go to stop someone, they just take off. And it is not a high risk, okay? It's not. They just take off because they know the police will not pursue them.
That's right.
And as the representative said, this is a priority of police all around the country, not just Louisville, Northern Kentucky, Lexington, Covington, Boone County Sheriff's Office. And I think we need to stick with our present language. This is the meat and potatoes of this bill.
The math, looking at the current years that we've got, or the most recent years on fleeing and evading charges, this one set of sections alone has a $600 million price tag over the next decade. And that seems excessive for one section out of a 48, 50 section bill. They're not all going to be that big a price tag. But I guess I'm curious, what aggravating circumstances could we add that gets at what you're talking about?
I think what we've committed to is to get back with you, and obviously Senator Schickel believes we should leave the language the same, but we need to get back to you on that. And our hope is that the numbers won't be as high because people will understand that you can no longer run from the police.
Except,
And more than that, though, Mr. Chairman, I do not care what it costs when you consider the face on the screen there. This kid, Jake Luxemburger, was killed by someone fleeing the police at a high rate of speed because, like Senator Schickel said, they knew they wouldn't be chased because in most states today you can't chase them. The police are told to stand down and not create more of a hazard, and this young man was killed. His life was taken, and so if it costs a little bit more money to ensure that we keep people like Jake Luxemburger alive, then I'm okay with that.
except under the language that I proposed, it would include this very case. Have you all looked at the aggravators that I offered?
I'm looking at them now. I think we got to get back with you, Mr. Chairman.
Operates a vehicle in excess of 30 miles per hour above the limit. And I'm open to changing. I just pulled it from 189A.010. Operates a vehicle in the wrong direction on a limited access highway. Operates a motor vehicle that causes an accident resulting in death or serious physical injury. Operates a motor vehicle with blood alcohol in excess of whatever. Operates a motor vehicle that is transporting a passenger under the age of 12.
I get it.
Pick any other aggravators.
I like conflict, and this is starting to feel like a deposition, and I'm cool with that. But I will say that as we sit here, and we've said before, I'm going to say it again, we have to get with the stakeholders that are the experts, and then we can get back to you, Mr. Chairman. But I will also note that we would be happy when we get back to you to show you and provide for this committee the long criminal history of the man who killed Jake Luxemburger, who was out on parole or out on bail, being bailed out by one of these bail organizations.
Let's make that an
anything.
aggravator too.
And so we will I'd love to.
Make it a double aggravator.
And so we'll provide you also with the criminal history of the man who was out on bail that shouldn't have been out on bail that killed Mr. Luxemburger. He had a long one.
Okay, go ahead. There wasn't an objection there. I did think that was a weird constitutional issue. I did have one change. I'm reading that. Folks, this is similar to a bill. There may have been a House bill, but I know we had a Senate bill. It was Senator Yates' bill that allowed. You all recall we had a bill, senators. We had a bill earlier this session that opened that 90-day window on aggregating theft charges up to a year. And this bill does the same thing, but this adds an extra provision that allows different counties to be aggregated. My only change, and I think it's the only constitutionally sound change, and I think it needs to be in there, you can't be prosecuted in multiple counties for that same act or offense. And I think it needs to explicitly say that. So if the crime occurred in Christian and Jefferson struck first on the indictment, then that's where the charge gets tried.
Yeah, I think we'd be fine with that clarification. I would say that circuit court and district court are statewide jurisdictions. So I think double jeopardy would already protect that, but we'd be happy to clarify that in the language if that's what's required.
You're not wrong, and that was part of my thought process, but that's a really novel approach, and we don't do that on anything else. And we don't elect – I mean, it's a unified court system, but Christian County's got its prosecutors. Jefferson County has its prosecutors, and they're not trying cases in the other one's jurisdiction. And it also comes with complicating factors because now the county that's prosecuting it's got to deal with law enforcement or witnesses or experts or whatever in another county. So it comes with some.
We have no problems with that clarification.
Thank you. We're getting down to the end. And this was an add-on. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. That's not in the bill as is, but it's what Josh asked for you all to include, right? Or asked us to include. Is that in Senator Schickel's sub too?
It is.
Okay, thank you.
And this should be the last one, sir.
I appreciate the inclusion of the Restorative Justice Advisory Committee language that's similar to Senator Storm's bill 3-something.
343.
343.
I think it won't even have any different commas placed.
I appreciate that. Is there any objection to the recidivism task force created in the addition I made at the end of my sub? And I'm certainly open to suggestion on changes or edits to it.
And Mr. Chairman, is that sections 49 and 50?
Yes, 48. 48, and then 49 spells out the members of it. It's at page 73 and 74, 75.
Obviously, being, 3 or 4 pages, we want to be able to look at it. Obviously, the point is to reduce recidivism. I don't know what this does. So we can't commit to it as we sit here.
Okay.
But we will look at it. We've got a list of things we're going to get back to the committee.
Thank you. Anything else? Senator Schickel?
Yeah, I have a few things I want to say. First of all,
I'm going to ask if there are questions to ask questions, but we're not going to have commentary right now.
okay, well, let me know when you're ready for commentary.
Yes, sir. Okay. Do you all have any closing thoughts before I start hearing from folks that are here to testify? Senator Neal, you have a question? Go ahead, and then I'll let you all speak.
I have 3 questions. Be short.
Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you, gentlemen. First of all, what I want to ask you is, this seems to be a lot of bills rolled into one, sort of like an omnibus type of thing. And I want to know, is this approach that you're putting here before us today data-driven? What is it based upon? I've done a little reading, and people have approached me, and there's a big question as to whether or not it's data-driven, which I think it would be very important to do anything in this particular area and many areas that we do policy in. So can you identify specifically that data, and if you don't have it before you right now, can you provide it before we take action on this by Thursday?
Yes, sir. So I think that's a great question, and I can tell you as to the size of the bill, I would assert that this bill is commensurate with the public safety, security, and protection needs of our state right now. It is much smaller than, say, Senate Bill 200 from 2014. And when it comes to data, we have some research that we've looked at. And we also have data points from people that are on the ground, that are in the system. At the House meeting, the state FOP president came to testify and support. The Commonwealth's attorney's president came and testified and support. The county attorney's president came and testified and support.
Excuse me just for a second. My question is pretty simple. Is it data-driven? Is what I'm asking. And do you have the resources and will provide them so they can be inspected before we take a vote on Thursday? That's all I'm asking.
Yes, sir. I want to understand it.
Can you do that?
I want to understand it better because the data for what, sir?
Well, you got all these bills, you got all these things that rolled into one. There must be some foundation and research that's been done on which you base this, or is this just aspirational?
So if you're saying is there data to support that that this type of policy makes communities safer and reduces crime, yes, sir, we do have that. The gentleman sitting here can speak to that.
Well, I only asked a very direct question. I said, you have data that you base this upon, and will you provide it before sufficient time before we take action on this Thursday?
Yes, sir. I can provide some of it right now.
Can I get it tomorrow specifically?
I can hand it to you right now.
All the data that this is based upon.
Well, no. Not all of it, but everything that I have here with me.
That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the data that's driving the policy changes that you're proposing here. That's all. It's very simple.
Yes, sir.
And Senator,
absolutely.
Get that, but it's also conversations with a lot of experts, a lot of circuit judges, a lot of Commonwealth's attorneys.
I'm talking about data.
That is data, sir. Right. That is data.
That's data because you have a conversation with somebody and they give their opinion about something.
It absolutely is. Experts that live in this system that work around these provisions every single day.
Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, then I don't want to take all your time. And I just want to make sure I can get the information. Second thing I have is, what is the impetus for this? Is this, I think, at least what I'm picking up, there's some increase in crime that's going on, or is that the impetus?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. So have you looked at the data in Jefferson County and across the state as to what's happening with crime in Kentucky? Jefferson County, excuse me, let me
Yes,
finish. Jefferson County specifically, because the data I've looked at in the last few days demonstrates that crime in almost every category, some exceptions, are precipitously going down, and that you have a similar trend that's taking place across the state. Now, I know you can raise an exception and you can project from that, but all my question is have you consulted that, and are you aware of that?
I'm aware that Kentucky is one of only 3 states in the country in 2023 where violent crime rose. That is what I'm aware of. This bill is focused on violent crime.
That's not my question.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to be quick, Mr. Chairman.
Well, Senator, if you're asking me if I'm aware
Let
of the
him
data
respond,
that you're
and
looking
then you
at, the
can
answer
ask
is
again.
no.
Go ahead, Representative.
I'm sorry, your question?
If you're asking me if I'm aware of the data that you have in front of you, the answer is no, sir.
Then I'll provide that to you.
Thank
and
you.
then the last question.
Hold on a second. Hold on. Also, though, Senator, look, we know what's happening in our communities. 10 years ago, we had around 80 murders a year, a little bit fewer than 80 murders a year in Louisville. Now, if we have 140, we're lucky. It's up in the 160s every year. That's just murders. Also, as Representative Ballman just said, and I want to say it again, this is from the Council of State Government, which we rely on a lot of things that we do. Kentucky is only one of 3 states that had an increase in violent crime last year. That's an important data point.
Okay, you'll provide that data as I
Of course we will. Yeah, and that's
I think we dealt with that.
I'll actually point out, members, there's also some crime data in the back of your folders if you want to review that shows Kentucky's crime and violent crime data over the last several years for reference, which shows it's not nearly as bad as everyone says it is.
Well, but I have one more thing I'm gonna say, and that is that in 2022, the last numbers I have, and Senator, I know you don't. I know we disagree on the policy of this bill. I know that, and I very
don't
much.
know what
but
I disagree on.
Okay,
I just
hold
want
on,
to know what
hold
this
on,
is
Senator
based
Neal.
on.
I don't mean to.
Let him finish.
I don't mean to in any way besmirch you or I think we see it a little bit different. But let me say this: 124 JCPS students were shot in 2022. Hold on, I'm going to finish this point. And 23 of them were shot and killed. We do have a violence problem in Kentucky, especially among our young folk. And so you want to know what you said, what was the catalyst to this bill? 124 JCPS kids getting shot is a doggone good one.
Thank you very much. And
Senator,
my last,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
and my
You have
last
another
question.
Go ahead.
My last question is costs that this generate. Does that moderate any approaches or concerns about how we approach controlling crime in our communities and across Kentucky? Because the information I have, and I think we all agree, we want less crime.
Right.
You know, I think in an ideal world, we want no crime. But the fact of the matter is, we're going to have crime because we set rules and people have aberrant behavior in various societies, but including our own. But what I'm asking is cost a consideration in your judgment in terms of the policies you're proposing here?
Sir, I can tell you that the cost of doing nothing far outweighs the cost of what the impact on this bill would be. Far outweigh. It's not even close. We're talking the impact of crime in the state of Kentucky is in the billions of dollars annually. And one of the reports I saw recently said that this bill may cost the state $1 billion, may cost the state $1 billion over 10 years. And so when we're talking about human life, as Whip Nemus just referenced, and really the cost of crime, it's not even close. This is good policy, and the fiscal impact is minimal compared to the cost of crime itself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I want to give you a chance to close your thoughts here, but I do want to get to several of the witnesses, and I'm just going to tell folks I'm not going to get to all of you. I can't, because the sponsors got to leave, other people got to leave, so we're not going to get as far as we want. Senator Schickel has requested that he have some opportunity to talk about his sub, and I'll note that all of your slides were for his substitute. So we've been hearing from his sub all day, but I want him to have time so that he can speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This sub is about street crime. We put other things in it because other people have wanted something in it, but it's important that we keep our focus on what this is about. It's about street crime and our communities deteriorating. Now, you say, well, what does homelessness have to do with street crime? Well, homelessness is causing our neighborhoods to spiral down. People are afraid to go conduct business. They're afraid to go out and walk in the evening. This isn't just in Louisville. This is in my home community. There is a problem in our streets. Do our county attorneys know nothing? Do our FOPs know nothing? Do Commonwealth attorneys know nothing? Do the Kentucky Association of Chiefs of Police know nothing who have endorsed this? These are the people that serve our community, and you can turn a blind eye to it, but it's a problem. And it's also a justice problem. We really don't know what makes us safe, but we do know what justice is. And when someone carjacks a car and there's no consequences, or someone's camping out in your front yard and there's no consequences, or people are ruining your neighborhood with open drug use and things like that, that causes a community to spiral down. Like the bill sponsor originally said, that is our first priority as a government. And that is the spirit in which I offer this committee sub. People want statistics. The inference to that is if they just had enough statistics, they could fix everybody. But I don't buy that. I buy that people choose what they want to do. And we can try to help them along into rehab and things like that, but there have to be consequences to conduct. And what my committee sub offers is serious consequences to serious conduct against the peace and dignity of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, our cities, our counties, and our state.
Any parts of your sub that you wanted to get into, Senator?
Well, there are three main parts of the sub which I think are very important. The part about homelessness is very important, even though I know it is very, very emotional for people. The three strikes you're out are very important. It's important that we have consequences to violent felonies. To me, that's the meat and the potatoes of the bill. And the part about pursuits are the meat and potatoes of the bill. Without our police being respected, they cannot police our communities. Those are the three pillars of this bill.
Thank you, Senator. Okay, I'm going to have some other folks come up. Go ahead, Representative.
No, sir. I'm okay. We can end with Senator Schickle's comments. I think they were perfect. So, thank you.
I want you to be able to defend yourself here. I do want to take some testimony for a few more minutes. I know you've got to get on the road. We're going to make some time on Thursday again.
Yes, sir. I will stay, sir. I'm in good shape. I'll stay.
You leave when you need to leave.
Yes, sir.
You have given a lot of your time tonight, and this chair is very grateful for it, and I appreciate it.
So
and
for the committee,
questioning.
Today is my son's 16th birthday, so
right.
He's expecting to see me at some point this evening.
I'm trying to tell. I told him. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. I'm going to ask. So, folks, for these last folks, I know some of you have got remarks prepared, and you've tried to shoot for 5 minutes. I'm going to cut you down to 3, and I'm going to get through as many as we can, and then we're gonna call tonight, and then we'll take it back up on Thursday. Not going to give a whole lot of time on Thursday because there's a lot of other bills we're going to do. So, I'm just go in no particular order here. I want to bring up Joey Comley with Right on Crime. And then Phil with KCDL, you're on deck. I got a clock up here, so try to keep it to 3, because you got members that have other places they got to go.
Mr. Chairman, Senators, I'll be a minute and about 47 seconds. I time myself. So I'm honored to be here today and representing Right on Crime as its Kentucky State Director. As a citizen of this Commonwealth, I'm a career soldier turned lawyer who has served on multiple occasions across our country and a number of foreign countries as a prosecutor, a defense counsel, and a command legal advisor in the United States Army. I now live with my family in Elizabethtown. I have 3 brief points in my testimony today. First, I believe Kentucky is safe. And that's why I chose to live here after 20 years of living abroad and in a number of other states. I chose to raise my family here. In fact, my children, 2 teenagers, actually told my wife and I when we were getting ready to retire in 2022, and I quote, "We like Kentucky, we like the people here, we think it's safe, and we think it's a good place to grow up." Well, I agree with my children. And I'll bet that the city of Elizabethtown and the county of Hardin and my children's experiential reference point is not all that different from that of many citizens and counties compromising your Kentucky districts. Second, the data supporting this bill and the committee substitutes before you is not based on a study of any cities in Kentucky or the state of Kentucky. And the professional study, it's done by an esteemed colleague of mine who analyzed that same data and applied those sources that Senator Neal was asking about, arrived at recommendations that, in my opinion, are not followed by House Bill 5. Not except for stiffer sentences for violent offenders anyhow. And I agree with exactly what Senator Schickel said. His bill provides consequences for people. Stiff consequences. But consequences alone will not solve Kentucky's criminal problem. Third, I would submit that any comprehensive criminal justice overhaul like House Bill 5 requires Kentucky data coupled with multidisciplinary deliberation and the exercise of this General Assembly's resolute discernment. I challenge all of you, senators, Mr. Chairman, to see if House Bill 5 is the product of any one of those 3 desirable characteristics, much less a product of all 3. Mr. Chairman, senators, thank you very much for your time and for your service to our Commonwealth. I respectfully submit to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Comley. I'm going to go ahead and tell Pam Thomas with Kentucky Policy, you're on deck after Philip. Go ahead, Philip.
Good evening. My name is Philip Lawson. I'm the legislative agent to the Kentucky Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. Since the filing of HB 5, KECDL has been very concerned about the bill's impact on the criminal justice system in Kentucky. From our view, it would stretch prison and jails further past their breaking point and drastically increase spending on our penal system that already costs too much. While at the same time, it could reduce funding for rehabilitation and mental health services, which have shown to positively address crime and recidivism, all the while appearing to have little to no evidence showing that it could reduce crime on a macro level. In other words, we are concerned HB 5 would not be a good investment for Kentucky. However, KCDL believes Senator Westerfield's proposed committee substitute contains significant and material changes that address our concerns. In particular, the changes made to the violent offender statute, which has been our primary concern with this statute. His version removed the attempted crimes, which would have dramatically punished nonviolent and incomplete criminal conduct while drastically increasing cost and incarceration. Additionally, he removed crimes that would capture nonviolent conduct, such as robbery second degree and wanton endangerment first degree, and added crimes that more accurately and precisely address actual violent crimes, such as arson, strangulation, burglary first degree. KCDL commends Senator Westerfield for these changes as well as others. For instance, his proposed changes to the 3 strikes provision, the promoting contraband statute, and creation of a juvenile advisory committee. However, we still have significant reservations about other provisions within the statute, mainly the charitable bail, homeless encampment, the what we call self-help shopkeeper and commercial property provisions, and the juvenile conspiracy statute. Among those, our largest concern is the juvenile conspiracy provision, which you referenced. In its current form, there is a very real and likely frequent possibility that high school-age children could receive significantly different sentences. For instance, imagine a 17 and an 18-year-old were convicted of conspiracy to commit robbery first. To be convicted, these children will not have to complete the crime, but only engage in a conspiracy to commit it. The 17-year-old would likely be prosecuted in juvenile court, while at the same time the 18-year-old would be sentenced to a Class A felony, a penalty range far greater than if he had actually committed the crime alone. So to avoid this clear sentencing disparity, we do ask that the committee further consider that provision and amend it to avoid that sentencing disparity. To be clear, we do not believe HB 5 should pass at this time. Its cost would be significant and its impact on crime speculative. Instead, HB 5 should be studied more thoroughly and costs more accurately assessed before enactment. However, the choices between the House version, the alternative committee substitute, which I believe is by Senator Schickel, and Senator Westerfield's committee substitute, we ask that you strongly urge you to adopt Senator Westerfield's committee substitute. Thank you. And I've also been taking notes on various questions that's been asked, and I'd be happy to address some of those, particularly two that you had.
I appreciate that. Senator Wheeler's got a question.
Sure.
How many violent crimes should society or decent people have to endure before they're removed and put in a place where they can't harm society anymore?
Well, that's an interesting question. In regards to the violent offender statute, the issue that we had was, again, I think the same concern that Senator Westerfield had, which is casting too wide a net that would not only capture nonviolent conduct, but also drastically increase costs and incarceration. Like you and everybody else on this committee, I mean, we're people too. We may be criminal defense lawyers, we may be, targeted in certain ways, but in a way, we're the same. We want the same thing.
Well, how many assaults should you get? Should you get 1 assault, 2 assaults, 3 assaults?
Well, as you may have gathered, we haven't had any specific comments regarding the 3-strike provision. We do think that we have focused on other provisions. We do have concerns rather about how productive it would be to reduce crime on a macro level, but at the same time, we've focused our attention on other provisions.
Okay. Well, I mean, I heard your testimony. I thought you brought up that you were opposed to the 3 strikes provision in this bill, which pertains to violent crime. And did you hear Representative Nemes's testimony that Kentucky's violent crime statute is one of the more narrow ones in the nation?
I did hear that, and I did.
Would you agree with that?
I haven't studied the other ones. All I know is generally, just from what I've heard from various other people that I believe will testify today about more data-driven information relating to 3 strikes provisions, that has been shown not to be effective.
Well, isn't it not true that many people that have gone with these more data-driven solutions are now dialing back their more liberal crime enforcement policies, such as we see in Oregon and Washington, D.C. and other places, because there has been shown to be an increase in violence?
Candidly, Senator Wheeler, I'm getting out of my lane here in the sense of I'm a criminal defense lawyer, and that's what I do. I see a lot of this stuff every day. For instance, Senator Westerfield asked about the $500 fine. You know, everything I've seen from my representation of thousands of defendants in these cases is you'd have to serve out at $50 a day. So that could be a potentially 10-day punishment for that position. But to answer your question, I'm not certain. Again, that would be my response.
Senator Schickel.
Thank you. My question is for the gentleman from Smart on Crime. Sir, didn't your organization back the raising the felony threshold for theft?
I'm with Right on Crime, Senator
Okay,
Schickel.
I'm sorry, Right on Crime. Yeah.
I joined this organization in September. While I'm qualified to answer Senator Wheeler's question, I can't tell you about the historical support or non-support of my organization.
Okay. Well, I can tell you that they did. And at that time, we were told by your organization it was data-driven, and it's turned out to be a disaster. Did your organization back House Bill 463 that had to do with drug possession?
When was that, Senator Schickel?
Approximately
2011.
Yeah, thank you.
I can't tell you, Senator Schickel.
Well, I can tell you they did, and it turned out to be a disaster for our state. Thank you.
Ms. Thomas.
Chairman Westerfield and members of the committee, thanks for this opportunity to testify. My name's Pam Thomas, and I'm a senior fellow with the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy. And I know many of you from my 25 years with the A&R committee here, so I'm happy to be back. As House Bill 5 was moving through the process, we became concerned because of the lack of an updated corrections impact statement or other fiscal information that would help us understand the cost of the bill. We knew the information was important, so we requested data from the Department of Corrections through an open records request. And we were also able to use some of the data provided from them and along with other information from the corrections impact statement on the original bill to look at the impact of just two provisions in the bill: the broad expansion of the violent offender statute and the cost of enhancing the penalty for fleeing and evading. The changes to the violent offender statute alone will cost more than $800 million over the next decade, and these changes, it's primarily because of the length of sentences. The 85% serve requirement is expanded to all Class C and D felonies. Under current law, it's A and B felonies. And also the definition of who commits a felony at any level that results in the death or serious physical injury of a person is expanded as well, whether that's intentional or not. So that's a big thing, is to think about it. It doesn't have to be an intentional death or physical injury, but anyone that commits one of those offenses has to serve 85%. In addition, I think Senator Westerfield noted this before, the cost of the fleeing or evading could be anywhere between $311 million and $535 million. And that's, again, significantly due to the length in sentences. It's interesting to note, I think Representative Nemes represented the Council for State Governments, the Judicial Center there, and the data that they produced. And they also independently looked at these same two provisions in the Kentucky statutes over the same 10 years, and their numbers were really similar to ours. Data was a little bit different that they had and that we had because we had different requests, but pretty similar. They also looked at the additional number of beds that would be needed to accommodate the new people who will be in prison for longer, prison and jail. And their analysis found that there was 1,150 new prison beds that would be needed and about 2,400 new jail beds needed over the period of time. There's currently 19,309 people incarcerated in correctional facilities in Kentucky, and that's a number that's greater than the population of 57% of our counties. More than 3,500 of them are over 50 years old, and more than 4,000 of them are serving sentences that are greater than 20 years. The current average sentence length in Kentucky is 14 years. As more people age in prison, they'll need more frequent medical care related to the conditions around aging. In the Corrections Impact Statement on House Bill 5 is introduced, the Department of Corrections estimates that the average daily cost of holding someone in a prison is $117, and it'll be at least $31 more a day as the medical costs increase. The latest jail population report reflects that 49 of Kentucky's full-service jails, that's 69% of them, are over 100% of capacity, and in more than half of them, this is a chronic condition. This is a system that cannot handle the influx of new people if House Bill 5 passes in its current form. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. I'm going to ask Sarah Durant and Andrew McNeil to come up with Kentucky Free. I'm going to stop at 6:45. So, folks, I'm sorry to all those we're not going to get to tonight. You all go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, I'm Sarah Durand.
There's Sarah. Green light.
Oh, there
you go.
I'm Sarah Durand with Kentucky Free. We are a free market center right organization. To begin, we want to thank the sponsors of both of these bills for meeting with us, as well as the sponsors on the House side for having a very open door policy and working with us on this legislation. Since this bill's inception, many of our concerns have been met, but many also remain. One of our top concerns is the cost to the taxpayers. For a bill of this size, scope, and expense, we need an in-depth fiscal analysis to the state government, the local corrections, and the local governments. The fiscal analyses provided by the LRC so far state that House Bill 5 is significant in cost, but indeterminable. Regardless of outside organizations that show that this bill will cost billions of dollars over the next few decades, we need an in-depth analysis from the LRC for both of these subs before they should be voted on. Without that, we risk bankrupting our counties. There are many parts to this bill, but the increase in criminal penalties alone will lead to longer sentencing requirements to bankrupt our counties. This is despite Kentucky having low recidivism rates. Over 70% of people who are serving under current sentencing guidelines without the enhanced penalties will re-enter society successfully. They will become taxpayers to help carry the burden of our overwhelmed criminal population prison system. Less than 30% of those released from prison go on to reoffend, and most of those are low-level offenses or drug crimes. The problem is that whenever a violent offender gets out and reoffends, the media reports on it. They don't report on all the people who get out who don't reoffend. So it sticks in our head, and we think that it's statistically significant when it's actually not. So we're going to pass a sweeping, expensive law that overly punishes people based on a false bias from how the media reports on things. There are too many provisions of House Bill 5 to cover, but please know that many will significantly increase the burden borne by taxpayers to support the state's correction system. Our organization champions fiscal responsibility, and we believe it's a mistake to consider this legislation without providing the public an opportunity to review an in-depth fiscal note.
Senator Westerfield, if I could just add another moment or minute of comments on that. I do appreciate that you have held this hearing for discussion, only because it's important for these issues and this discussion and this to be out in the public. And I commend you and would think that there's an opportunity to find some middle ground between these two committee subs. And I want to speak to one provision specifically, and that's the 3 strikes language. There is a way to design that language or to write that language that meets both the goal of incarcerating or keeping violent offenders off of the streets, but also respecting the taxpayers in terms of what the long-term costs are of incarceration, especially for those that are older than the age of 60. For those who have not committed a capital offense, I'm not taking any exception with the language related to those who have committed a capital offense. You know, a literature review from the NIH shows that less than 4% of violent crime and property crime is committed by somebody over the age of 60. This is the time in an inmate's life when the cost of incarceration will begin shouldering a larger share of healthcare costs. It'll become increasingly expensive to keep these inmates in prison. And to a point that you made, Mr. Chairman, a recommendation that we made or will make is to draw from the persistent felony offender statutes that will provide sentencing that is long enough to keep persistent violent offenders who haven't committed a capital offense off the street, but make them eligible for release once they've reached the age where they're highly unlikely to commit another violent act and avoid the skyrocketing costs of their continued incarceration. One last observation I'd like to make is somebody who was in the state budget director's office 8 years ago. The budget environment that this town and this state has experienced in the last 5 years is out of the norm. A revenue growth that we have seen to be able to meet pension obligations, increase educational funding, fund various projects, and have discussions for larger appropriations to different types of infrastructure, that is an anomaly. There will be a time when resources become more scarce. And that's when the term crowding out is going to become very relevant. Because once you've incarcerated these folks, the appropriation for corrections is on automatic pilot unless you start releasing them. And that's when you're going to find that you don't have the money to do all the things that this General Assembly has been able to do and consider over the last 4 to 5 years. You got to think about the out years and the pressure that this is going to put on the budget, because a recession will happen, revenues will drop, and guess where you cannot cut? It's going to be the Department of Corrections. So where do you go get those cuts? You're going to find them in the programs that you would rather be funding. And so that's just something I'd like to add for everyone to consider. Thank you very much.
Thank you both so much. Senator Wheeler's got a question for these presenters, Senator.
Yeah, I guess I saw some disconnect between the statements that you all made. You talked about how 70% of people don't reoffend and that Kentucky is a low recidivism state, and yet you specifically choose the three strikes provisions, three violent strike provision to single out here when that provision in and of itself is an example of repeat recidivism. In fact, that little boy we saw on that picture, how much is that worth for him to be still alive? That was a violent offender that was bailed out by somebody, the bail project, a repeat offender. How much is that kid's life worth? I mean, is it just dollars and cents to you all, or
Senator, do you think
protecting the public?
Do you think that writing this law is going to prevent every case like that?
No, but if it just prevents one of them, I think it's money well spent.
Thank you both. Our last two speakers that I'm going to make room for tonight, I'd like to have Lacey Bowling with the Paducah Cooperative Ministry, if she's still here, and Miss Felicia Newman with the Louisville Urban League. Thank you. These will be our last two speakers of the night. So if you've signed, and there are 7 or 8 other people that have signed up to speak, I'm sorry I can't accommodate you tonight.
Ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, thanks for accommodating me. I'm from Paducah, Kentucky, so it's a long ride today and a
That's
long
why I
way
called
back.
on you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I want to be clear. I'm not a professional. I'm not a professional lobbyist. But I'm a little offended on behalf of the people I serve in Paducah. My ministry serves at least 40 individuals a night at our Fresh Start Village. It's a transitional shelter for women and women with children. Our typical shelter guest is white, 30 to 39 years old. A lot of them have a misdemeanor, at least a high school degree or more, work full-time in the retail or food service industry. I guess my concern is, are these the criminals we're talking about? Is Caitlin, who waited 14 months to be approved for subsidized housing, is she the criminal we're talking about? Is Crystal, who works overnight at a full-time job and still can't afford housing, is she the criminal? Are the 30 families displaced from the Noble Lodge closing in McCracken County on a cold winter afternoon, are these the criminals? A student at a local elementary, and a family member of that group. Are the over 50 people each month that call Paducah Cooperative Ministry looking for shelter, are these the criminals that we're talking about? I just ask that you consider a humane solution, a solution-oriented approach to the Commonwealth's housing issues rather than punishing the poor and leaving nonprofits to scrape up system-created issues. In my opinion, I think House Bill 5 puts a boot on the neck of Kentuckians that are already in distress. Furthermore, I think this bill implies that homelessness is caused by substance use disorder, and that is not always the case. I simply ask that you remember there's an alternate solution here, a compassionate solution, a humane solution, and that you remember that these people are our neighbors that we share communities with. They deserve to be treated with dignity and peace as well as the others that we've talked about today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bowling. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you making the trip up here. Members, that concludes our presentation today. We've got a full agenda on Thursday, and we will come back to House Bill 5 at that time for a vote. I appreciate it. Seeing no further business come before the committee, we are adjourned.